And a very good evening to everyone. Welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. Here we are on Tuesday afternoon, sorry, and we have quite a packed program for you today. In the first part of the program, I'll be talking to Dr. Richard Van West Charles, former government minister, former CEO, and I think chair of GWI. And, quite a lot has been happening at GWI over the last week or two. And then we will round off the program with a discussion on extrajudicial killings in Guyana. Over the weekend, we had the family of Peter Headley, a man who was shot by police and killed, and the family raised a number of questions. And the issue has been taken up by political people who are vowing that they would ensure that there is justice for Peter Headley. He was shot. The police has not answered a number of questions, suspicious circumstances. And we'll have two attorneys. We'll have Geeta Chandan Edmonds, Member of Parliament for the APNU AFC, and Selwyn Peters, who's a long-time attorney operating out of Canada, but has done a lot of cases in Guyana. And he's also the attorney for Paul Slow. But this evening, he's going to be talking to us about extrajudicial killings. So we'll start with Dr. Van West Charles, and then we'll have attorneys Geeta Edmonds and Selwyn Peters to deal with that question of extrajudicial killings. Of course, we are always in the midst of lots of political action, and we want to capture a different perspective here on Politics 101. So do what you always do, which is to let others know that we're on, share the link as much as possible, and keep those who would want to disturb the peace, keep them under control. Again, welcome to Politics 101. Richard Van West Charles is no stranger to politics and public life. He served as Minister of Health under the Burnham and Hoyt government in the 1980s. And he answered the call to come back into the fray in 2015 when there was a change in government to lend his technical skills and his managerial skills to the new government in the area of water. Dr. Van West Charles, welcome to Politics 101.
It's good to be here, David.
And I was saying to you that you've been quite busy these past couple of weeks because of what the folks are doing over there at GWI.
Well, not only GWI. I've been busy with my fuel license in the courts and so forth. But GWI is up front at the moment.
Yes, I said in my intro that you answered the call to come back to serve your country after you left government. You left government in 1992 or before?
No, before. I left government in 1990.
Yes.
I went to join PAHO WHO.
Right.
And that I remained there for over 25 years, working internationally with PAHO WHO.
Yes. And of course, accumulating in the process skills that any country like ours would need. And so what made you come back in 2015? What?
Well, I was back before 2015, actually. I resigned in 2009 And then I was back in Guyana for a while, and then I returned back to Canada for a short bit and came back in 2000 and at the end of 2014. Got involved in the campaign um, because Guyana is my home. I'm born Guyanese, um, and therefore one wants to see your own country evolve and develop, knowing fully well of the potential we have to emerge as a main economic pillar in the Caribbean. So it was very critical for me to come back and work. And then understanding that I'm very interested in poverty alleviation, knowing fully well that we have about 35% poverty in Guyana, and we need to be looking at it through a different lens, to my mind, the way that we are treating it. So, and I would say to you that water and sanitation is no stranger to me. As a minister of government, I had the responsibility for water. Gaiwa, at that time, Gaiwa was under my ministry. I had at one time health and public welfare, and then health, water, housing, and the environment. And after that, I had medical education, food policy, and the environment. So it was a broad span of responsibilities.
And certainly, when you were offered the position, you thought that you were well equipped to deal with that issue. A lot of people who would have known you more as a health specialist, as a medical doctor, as a minister of health, would have been a little surprised that you took on the GWI. But you've explained it that you had oversight over that sector when you were a minister. When you got there in 2015, but before that, let me ask you the question as a follow-up to your answer just now. How important is water and sanitation to, first of all, the health of people, and second, to the overall economy? Make that linkage for the audience.
All right, going back centuries, water and sanitation has always been critical. In the plague, etc., water played a pivotal role, and sanitation becomes critical. Now, it is linked an importance in terms of economic development. Human capital is critical. So, when you talk about the health capital of the country and its contribution to economic development, you look from a public health standpoint in terms of what are the diseases that really have wiped out populations over centuries. And you consider these are waterborne diseases primarily linked with sanitation, gastrointestinal diseases. So water becomes very, very critical also for our own physiology. We cannot do without water on a daily basis. We cannot be dehydrated for any length of time and not suffer serious morbidity as we proceed. So water becomes very critical for production in the manufacturing industry. It's also for tourism. It's for other health reasons. But you look at even, I will mention, and I know you'll mention later, the sugar industry, agriculture. Without agriculture, there is no water. Without without water, there is no poultry industry. There's no pig industry. And the same thing pertains with respect to human health. The water quality is critical for human health as it is for animal health. So as we see now in what's confronting us with all of this flooding and the disaster that we are suffering right now, water becomes a very, very critical. The prime commodity that they began to distribute is water and access to water. So this is very, and that's why I put out on my page the other day, we need to have a boil order. because a lot of the network is submerged, and you can't take the chance of using the water until we are sure and guaranteed. And don't think you must be afraid to issue a boil order under these circumstances that we're in. But certainly, without water, there is no economic development.
Without water, there is no economic development. We are known as the land of many waters. Some people may say, well, then we have water in abundance. Why do we need people to manage water? What? We just have water, just use it, use it. Answer those people.
You need potable water.
There
You
you
need
go.
drinking water, and drinking water is distinct from the waters around you. And these standards have been set to ensure that our physiology as human beings can function effectively, that they're free of microbes, that they contain certain minerals, elements. So there's a pure distinction between what's around us and what we should be able to take and to ensure and guarantee our health. So that's a distinct difference. You know, when and this is one of the reasons that during our administration, a lot of emphasis was placed on water quality throughout the country.
Mhm. Yes. You know, I work in a part of the world which is in the desert, and water is premium in this part of the world, and you hear discussions all the time about the fear that we will run out of water, that water, while it's abundant, it's in abundance in many parts of the world. It's not an infinite thing that we have to look ahead, and there have been lots of discussions, and I'm sure you've been following those discussions. What should be our fears in Guyana about water?
Well, we have to be able to use water efficiently. And our geography, we are below sea level. We have to guard against saline intrusion into many of the wells. We have to ensure that there are no microbes getting in. And therefore, these wells have a certain life. And if we don't use them carefully, then the water, we'll have to keep looking for more and more water in the system and spending more and more money. You know, in the world today, they're even trying to capture. It's hundreds of billions of people in this world that are without water and sanitation. And they're even looking at capturing water from the atmosphere so that people can drink. So the scientists are continually working in trying to ensure that as a planet, our sustainable development is one of the things is the guarantee of access to water and good sanitation. When you look at the Sustainable Development Goals introduced by the United Nations, goal number 6 is, is a critical one in terms of access to water and sanitation. So this becomes critical for us, and it also spells out that it needs to be very close to our homesteads, where we live, etc. So one cannot overemphasize. You know, I was WHO representative in a number of countries, and always one of the programs that you have is water and sanitation. Always.
Yeah. Dr. Richard Van West Charles, former government minister, former head of GWI, which has been in the news quite a lot. Someone who has already contributed beyond the call of duty to his own country. A certain generation would remember Dr. Van West Charles as the son-in-law of President Forbes Burnham, and he's quite well positioned for our discussion this evening. Dr. Van West Charles, you took over GWI in 2015, right?
That's right.
Tell us about some of the challenges that you faced when you took over that agency?
Well, let me say to you, one of the first things is the guarantee of water quality to our country, to the citizens of our country. The quality of water really presented a challenge, and also um, the level of service of water and the access that you had. So you didn't have the 24/7 access. Now you just had in different areas 8 hours, 10 hours, 14 hours, um, in some areas 4 hours, and the water, the quality was questionable. So we began to move with the team. First of all, there was no planning unit. So I introduced a strategic planning, evaluation, and monitoring unit. And I met a plan, but that plan was developed by a consultant. So I then moved to develop a strategic plan with broad participation across the company. But I had to evaluate also the strategic plan that I met, and the performance was dismal. So we moved and we, first of all, started with the laboratories. You had one laboratory and performance very limited. I then moved to invite a consultant from Canada, Guyanese, Dr. Ramatar, and he worked with the staff, young engineers, chemical engineers, and we developed new standards, new processes, and expanded the capability of testing throughout the country. So we developed a central lab, which now has certification from the Bureau of Standards, and they're working for ISO certification. And then at Shelterbelt, which serves Georgetown and uses primarily surface water, which is drawn from the conservancy. And there, as I said many times, there are many different activities occurring upstream. So what we did, we established a lab within Shelterbelt, testing the water on an hourly basis as it is distributed in the city of Georgetown. We then had labs in Port Morant, and for the first time in the hinterland in Lethem, testing water now broadly and collecting samples in the hinterland populations, in the hinterland regions, 1, 7, 8, and 9. We established labs in Eccles, and we established new kits for testing at varying areas. Now, we also had a remit of submitting monthly results to the Public Utilities Commission because we fall under that commission also. And therefore, we complied and ensured that the results were submitted and the results are evaluated and analyzed. So when we got there, we were only performing about 7,000 tests per annum. By 2019, we were performing 66,000 and some tests per annum across the country. So it's a vast difference in terms of the focus of the administration on water quality as compared. And then we moved also in terms of looking at the inequity of access to water. And as you know, in the hinterland populations, the inequity was great in terms of access.
Mhm.
So we began to drill wells. When I got there, it took the company sometimes 6 months on average to complete a well. I then invited the Dutch and then the Brazilians, and that was reduced to about 6 weeks
Wow.
in terms of drilling wells. And then we moved to look at the purchase of rigs so that the company can be sustaining its capacity of drilling wells and providing water to the citizens of the country, not only for drinking, but for manufacturing, for economic development. And so we bought two rigs, one for the hinterland and one for the coast. And they are in the country. The one in the hinterland is working as we speak, and the one on the coast, they are awaiting materials which should have been ordered some time ago, but for some reason um, they were not ordered. You heard Mr. Bash saying how the mud pump is wrong. All that is inaccurate because the mud pump was used actually to drill the well at Farm, which was requested by us by CHNPA for us to drill that well. So in terms of that capacity, the company has the capacity. So we no longer are in the mode of contracting out, outsourcing the activities to contractors to drill, to provide the commodity, which is your business. So you're no longer dependent on these contractors. And the prices at that time were about 120 million to drill a well, and under our situation was about 65 million. That's our evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other area, we met, as I said, significant contracting out on every front. Transportation. If you needed transportation, all the transportation was contracted out across the regions.
Mm-hmm.
When we left in 2020, we left them with 19 vehicles to move staff. If you wanted a crane or a low bed, you had to contract it. And if you wanted for 1 hour, you had to pay for 4 hours. We had no water tanker if the wells went down due to GPC or whatever. We can move water to distribute to people so that they can have water with them for their daily needs. So we bought tankers, etc. A wide range of equipment. And then we were doing maintenance. We had maintenance teams, which took about 2 weeks on average for one well. Mr. Sheko, who was the then director of operations, and myself visited in Holland. I was returning from a conference in Copenhagen. We stopped in Holland. We met a number of companies because we were invited by an NGO for which we had a memorandum of understanding, Water is Our World, a Dutch NGO. And they introduced us to a number of companies. And where we saw that we could have done the maintenance of wells at a much faster rate. And we came back, we made the case, and we bought the equipment, which were placed on a truck. So you heard them making a lot of hay weather about a truck that is old, etc. The truck is not the equipment. The equipment are placed on the truck. It's a Mercedes truck with low mileage, and it's about 40. It was about 14 years. So, and mind you, they're making these issues in a country that is importing many used vehicles. But the issue of the equipment, the new equipment with the compressors and so forth, was on that truck for 45 million. As we speak, they issued a contract to maintain the well in Blackbush Polder at Yakasari for 9 million. And the guy has not completed the work for the maintenance of that well as yet. So one has to ask the question, why they are so close to this whole contracting process of everything that we do. And let me say to you, when we came in 2015, there was a forensic audit of the company. And when you look specifically at the contracting, there was a case where they bought pipes. The pipes were not in accordance with the specifications, and they sought to justify it. And eventually, the pipes could not be used. Likewise, there were contracts contracts which were signed before the date of tender opening. And so there are many examples of how the procurement process went awry under their watch. But what is very interesting, and I want to draw your attention to this because it's under Mr. Bash. I don't know if you recall the textbook scandal in
Yes.
2010.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So if you went to the Auditor General's report for 2010, you would see that the Ministry of Education, and he was the minister then, had a number of checks written before a contract was signed. Now, you talk about financial management and mismanagement. That is the example of financial mismanagement. And if you were to go through that report and read, there are some letters which were in Kaichor News at that time, in which um, book publishers wrote to the British High Commission querying this matter. So when they talk about financial efficiency and management, let us talk and look at the elements pound per pound. They talk about, I spent 50 million in meals. You have to look at, I didn't eat it, but these are for workers. When you have a porous network in the city of Georgetown that was rupturing frequently on St. John Road, on Cemetery Road, on Church Road, and workers have got to work. Then you have a series of other activities which we invested in for workers. You have the national holidays. You celebrate the abolition of slavery. All of these things are, you have to have um, food for staff, etc. And if you were to look at the amount of money spent per person over the 2 years, it's probably about 20,000. So I ask you, if you are understanding the 21st century approach of investing in your workforce, how can $20,000 per head be an issue for you? And you know what, David? Let's talk a bit about politics. The PPP is supposed to be a working class party.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose Mr. Bash is from the civic element, and I don't know how wedded they are to working class issues. But you have to work and sustain your workers. We launched a program of literacy for some workers because we have to look at how the workforce grows. So the young men who had dropped out of school, who are laborers, then there is a literacy program to help them to get their math and so forth, which they haven't got under their belt. Because when you do work, in all of the work that we do, and this is a problem in Guyana, you got to measure.
Yeah.
You have to measure. So we had an academy came in and worked with us. So I had said, before they're leaving work at 4:30 to go into the class, give them a snack. That's the best thing because they will not have eaten, etc. Now, what I hear, they're telling workers, if they have to go out of town to work, they give them 3 days notice. They must bring their own food. Good God. What manner of men are these? Not understanding that you've got to invest in your workforce for loyalty, commitment, especially in the area of water and sanitation. When we met, I will tell you, by the post office, where used to be Central Garage. Patricia Chase Green was then the mayor. We went down. As people flushed from a restaurant, the feces and everything came out. And we had to get involved. Workers have got to go there to correct those systems with the outfall of the sewage, all of those things. So when we ask these workers to do these things, you've got to understand that you must be able to say thanks and honor them and respect their commitment to the company and to the economic development of the country.
So glad you raised these points. First, the whole question of um, outsourcing the work of the ministry had become a feature of the PPP governance. It was one of the means by which it funneled state resources disproportionately to a number of its supporters. And a number of people got super rich through that process of outsourcing work. And it is very refreshing to hear that you came in and you turned that around. Because that's not the Guyana we know. The Guyana we know was not just about enriching business people, it was about empowering workers. And I am very glad to hear, and I think our audience would be very glad to hear that you look at the human side of workers. Workers working all day, and you're providing education for them, which I didn't know you did at PW. And I'm very glad to hear that you were thinking about the quality of the work and the quality of education in the workforce and doing something about it. And as a nutritionist, as someone who knows something about health, you obviously know the relationship between person eating and learning and working, and you get more out of that person. It seems to me that what you were about was modernization of the operation at GWI. Take it from there.
Let me give you an example. One of the first things I did, as you know, I'm a public health physician.
Right.
I looked at the toilets across the company. They were in a terrible state for both women and men. And I asked myself, why in a company of this type, or in any company, should workers not enjoy comfortable conditions in their washrooms and etc.? And so I instructed that everything be done. And also, I met a situation, everybody had a roll of toilet paper in their drawers. And I said, that is unacceptable. And I moved, and it is one of the things the staff knew me. Whenever I visited an office, one of the first places I go is to look at the washrooms. And then I look where they eat. I ensured that they had access to water in the offices. Because you had offices, they're working in an entity, but there is no water for them to drink. They needed to have fridges. They needed to have a little microwave to heat their meals, etc. So if you establish and show concern, first of all, for your workers, then you move. Then I decided to invest in training. So a number of people went off to do their masters and also sent them to do some other short courses throughout. So that may be what they're talking about overseas treatment, because overseas travel, because that's where the people went. So some people went to Holland, some went to the UK, etc. One or two went to Japan, one went to India, um, and I was always in contact with my staff when they traveled. As they were studying, I was in touch with them. How are you going? How are things going? How we can support you further, etc. Because you've got to invest in your staff. When we got in, and I looked at the city, for example, we had nearly about 1,000 fire hydrants in this city. They were in a bad shape. We decided, because the fire hydrants at the moment is in no man's land, and I took the decision to refurbish. We had meetings with the fire service, fire department, and we refurbished all of the hydrants That's why you can see them functioning effectively now.
Mhm.
And it's one of the things that when we had meetings with housing, we were insisting that the new housing schemes should have hydrants uh, in the schemes so that you can protect. Because we had situations whereby um, houses were destroyed due to the lack of access to water. And we even put connectors at the fire pump stations where the tenders can go to collect water. So we did a number of things with respect to looking at the security of housing with respect to fire and where water comes in. So we were working in tandem with the fire department, and that money, we didn't have any money coming from any other place. It's from the money that we collected, the revenue that we collected, and what we got, we used to do these things, and even expanded the service in the hinterland. And we were never given money to manage the hinterland, but we were making the case for the Ministry of Finance just before I was terminated that we need to have money to manage the aspect of the hinterland, and ensure that there is the inequities between the hinterland and the city are reduced significantly.
You've gotten a very comprehensive picture of the tenure of Dr. Van West Charles at DWI. And now there's all this noise about money spent and all that stuff. We now understand why monies were spent, because if you're modernizing an operation, you have to spend money. You invest in your workers in terms of education, health, and so forth. You are expanding the service. And I want to spend a minute or two telling us about that expansion of services, because I know there were places I was shocked. I was shocked that, almost 50 years into independence, there were some parts of Guyana that did not have access
Exactly.
to water. Tell us a little bit about that.
So in many parts of the world, we actually provided parts of the country. We provided access for the first time in the country to about 97,000 people, close to 100,000 people over the 4 years. In Region 6, in places like Highbury, Catbrat, Lighttown, and you can go on. And then in so many cases, they were only having access for a few hours during the day. And in many cases, they never had access onto the second floor. We established a standard that you should have access to the standard. So I don't know if you happen to would have heard some of the folks saying, "Look, for the first time, I can use my shower." Right? I recall former President Granger speaking to the matter that somebody said to him in light tongue, "Now I can bathe and have a shower."
Yeah.
And in particular, um, in Regions 3, Regions 2, we expanded the system. Now, Region 2 had a particular problem in terms of the high iron content and the quality of water they were receiving. So we then introduced a product to sequester the water so people can have a different quality of water coming to them so they can wash their white clothing, they're not staining their porcelain, all of these things. So all of these things come into the issue of quality of life. And then the impact in the hinterland. In the 4 years, David, we drilled over 48 wells. In 4 years, never before in the history of the country did this happen. And so we worked hard, and then when the government had an arrangement with the Brazil army to drill some wells in North and South Rupununi, they brought a technology with them that gave them more precision as to where they should drill. And our staff were there with them, together with GDF and the army, the Brazilian army. And it was a new piece of equipment that was being introduced to GWI. We worked and we, together with our funds, UNDP and Japan, we bought the piece of equipment. And I recall in a place like Campbelltown in Region 8, the contractor who had the contract made 4 tries to find water and couldn't find water. But when they used the technology, because the contract given to the contractor was saying you can drill up to 80 feet. But the technology, with the use of the technology, it showed you had to go down to 150 feet to find water, because the technology showed you exactly where the water was. And so they drilled the well, and so the community in there had access to water. In many different communities in Region 7 and 8, Wyling, Chinapau, all of these communities, we worked to provide access. And the thing is, when we bought the equipment, we had to send people to be trained to use the equipment. So I don't know whether they understand what is happening, because probably the whole movement of the company is so changed, so complex, that it boggles their mind to really understand what has been happening. And then I invited a few engineers from Culligan, the global company Culligan.
Yes.
And they came down and they began to do some work with us. And they introduced some new filters for ultrafiltration, which would reduce the use of chemicals. And we presented this to the Ministry of Finance. We got the money and we installed it at Bartica. And we also showed that with the use of further inline filters across the country, we would be able to reduce the amount of iron that is in the water and reduce the use of chemicals. We're about to get there, but things change. But I heard he was complaining about something is not working in Bartica. All they need to do is to get the outlet and the inlet and get the system functioning. I understand the engineers from Culligan should be here soon, and but it's a reputable company. It's not a fly-by-night company. It's a global company.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about these initiatives and you don't understand the technology or the chemistry, because there's a lot of chemistry. For example, when we hired process engineers in the laboratory to get the plants going, they wanted to send the process engineers off without understanding where these people sit, because it's a whole new configuration of
Mhm.
skills in a company. So this is their challenge. This is probably his challenge. And I don't know who the members of the board
Yeah, yeah,
are, but at
yes,
least they should take a pause.
yeah, yeah. After listening to you, and I want to tell the audience. After listening to you, I now have a sense of what happened at GWI. That first of all is ideologically at variance with the PPP's view of the world. That you change that whole architecture, but you also change the culture, which coming in now, they have a difficulty with. And I usually don't have government people come on to any program that I'm on to talk about what they did, because often it's generalizations, and they can't link what they did when they were in office to people's lives. And you have done that this evening, to show that when you started, here is where GWI was. Here is where the water regime in the country was, and here is where it was when you were pushed out 4 years later. It seems to me then that a new government coming in has the challenge. Would you continue this progressive direction or you don't continue it? Let me ask you, is there any justification for firing the hundreds of workers that they are fired? Is there any justification for right sizing GWI?
No, there is no justification if you understand, and if you, as you're making a very salient point in terms of the ideological difference and the ideological perspective that the APNU AFC brought compared to what was there before. Because if you understand what has got to be done with respect to water and what was introduced, you need people to maintain the system, to monitor the system, so that you have certain guarantees with respect to water quality that is being distributed to people. Because the issue is not only a quality at source, it is also the quality within the system, because the distribution system. And so you've got to ensure that the distribution system has physical integrity, first of all, the pipes. And then there are no breakages in terms of the hydraulic integrity, and then the water quality integrity. So once you can understand the elements of each of these, then you can see the relevance to the staff. But if you are only looking at a dollar figure, and you're not understanding what is your mission with respect to this commodity and how it is linked to economic development, then you're lost. You can't connect, and you're only looking at a dollar. Now, we have shown that we even increased the collections when we came in. Because when we came in, they were collecting about 3 point something billion. And we moved it to 5 point something billion. The only time when it started to drop is at the time of COVID. And those were the issues. And the point and the disingenuous point which they were making, that they didn't have money to pay the suppliers. We showed that the government owed us for supply of water to government buildings more than 1 point something billion dollars. And if we had gotten that, and which they got after we left, they were then able to start paying off. He said he reduced the amount to 200 million. That is the money that was supposed to come to us, owed to us by the government. Because what we call the key accounts, those are government accounts which were owed to GWI, and which should have been paid, and we were negotiating back and forth with the Ministry of Finance on this matter. So it's a case where they were not telling the truth about what came to them. That is as a result of, and I have all the letters that I wrote to the Ministry of Finance. So I don't understand why they would attempt to speak such untruths in terms of the arguments.
Richard Van West Charles telling us, and I took this angle today, not to focus on the so-called charges and accusations from the new management of GWI, but to focus on what has been done so that we can establish that really, as I said, this is a question of ideological direction, and ideological as far as what your emphasis on. What are you investing in? Are you investing in workers? Are you investing in your country? What are you modernizing water for? Because you want to link water to development, you want to link water to manufacturing, you want to link water to health. It seems to me with you at the helm, you were able to draw on your multifaceted experience to really put water and sanitation at the center of our economic development. And for that, I think we ought to give thanks because water, like any other area of national development, is not an island unto itself. Often you hear education ministers talking about education as though it begins there and ends there, and not linking education and health, between education and manufacturing. between education and financial literacy and all of those things. And so I want to establish that as we spoke today, I hope the audience saw the linkages. The linkages. You
Let me
wanted to
say, let me say to you, David, the other thing which I had staff do. Staff in each region had to visit the schools to ensure to look at the access. And we ended up completing a survey. That's what I'm saying to them now. As you rush to open schools with COVID-19, there is a survey done by GWI, UNICEF, IDB, PAHO, WHO, which really shows the situation with respect to water and sanitation in the schools. It requires an investment. You need to fix it because a lot of bad plumbing, the toilets are not flushing, etc. So the staff had a new orientation to go to the hospitals, to go to the health centers. Even when COVID started, our staff had the instruction. I instructed them and showed them what were the criteria that should be met for quarantine centers that they went around to look and check and see what was happening. So it's a whole new approach that we brought to bear in terms of what is going on in terms of economic development and where water sits. So the
thank you
staff
very much.
had a different remit.
Different remit.
And I would say to you, David, one other thing. When you make a comparison with the number of staff per thousand, and you look at other countries in the Caribbean that are smaller, much smaller than we are not in excess in any way. And you see, we presented these things to the previous board.
Yeah.
Because this issue came up that, we've increased in staff, but we had to make the case quite logically to show where we were, why this was done, etc. And so the evidence is there, and I can say to you there is no justification.
There's no justification. I must run out on us, Richard, because I've got Selwyn Peters, attorney Selwyn Peters, and attorney Peter Camden Edmonds waiting to deal with this issue of extrajudicial killings in Guyana. But I can't let you go, Richard. I remember years ago we caught up in Brooklyn at it was the folk festival, and you and I spoke for almost 3 hours. And one of the things that you told me then was that you were never going to give up on Guyana, that you think that you can serve Guyana in various capacities. You've come back, you've served Guyana in this very technical and critical area of water and sanitation. As we look forward, you're back on the central executive of the PNC. I know that you are doing work in that area, trying to revive the party, because any party that suffers political loss in the way in which the loss came about would need a lot of repairing and all hands on deck. Are you running to be leader of the PNC?
But let me answer you this way. Am I prepared? Yes. Am I willing? Yes. The only thing I would say to you, in accordance with the constitution of the PNC, it is in the hands of the membership of the PNC in terms of the nominations. So as we prepare for a Congress, once there are nominations in my favor, I am prepared and I'm willing to play a significant role in the leadership of the party.
There you have it. Richard Van West Charles making it very clear where he stands as far as throwing his hat into the ring for the leadership of the People's National Congress. And you know that leadership of the People's National Congress could translate into leadership of Guyana. Richard, I have guests waiting. I'm going to bring you back to talk straight party politics. in a couple of weeks, I promise. But you've given us enough tonight to whet the appetite. Thank you very much, my brother, for coming on. And it was good catching up after a good little while.
It was a pleasure,
Thank you.
and looking forward to talking with you as always.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Richard Van West Charles there, leaving us in no doubt as far as he's concerned about his readiness to take up the mantle of leadership of the PNC. We had Aubrey Norton, who made it very clear that he's running. We had Sharma Solomon, who said he will run if there are conditions. And we now have Richard Van West Charles, who said, I'm running, I'm running, I'm running once the process gets started. He thinks that he has the ability, he has the capacity to lead one of the two largest parties in the country. Well, you had quite an hour. Let's switch and bring in my other two guests immediately. Geeta Pandan Edmonds. And Geeta, how are you?
Good evening, Dr. Hinds. The name is actually Geeta Chandan Edmond.
Pandan
Thank you so
Edmonds.
much for having me on your program. It's really my pleasure.
Geeta, I asked you to come onto this program because I came across a news story last week on HGTV. I think this is the one on the East Coast, where you address this matter of the extrajudicial killing of Mr. Peter Headley. And I had the family on Sunday night, and they said, look, we have some concerns about whether the story that is told by the police is the proper story, or is there something that is being covered up? Do you think you're familiar with what the family is claiming? Do you think there is any legal basis for it?
All right. Once again, good evening, Dr. Hinds. Thank you so much for having me on your program. It's indeed a pleasure. Please permit me to express my sincerest commiserations to the family of Mr. Peter Headley. We know that in this time of grief and pain, it is difficult for the family, and I urge all Guyanese to extend support in support of their hour of grief. But before I go on to what you've asked, let me provide some background information on this matter. It has been publicly reported, Dr. Hines, and it has been stated in the police reports that Mr. Headley was shot by one of the two police ranks while he was being transported in a car headed to the Providence police station. Dr. Hines, the reports indicate that Mr. Headley and another person were in a vehicle. This vehicle was driven by Mr. Headley when the patrol ranks intercepted them. The ranks reportedly searched the car and they found a television set. The other person in Mr. Headley's car was arrested and placed in a police vehicle, while Mr. Headley, Dr. Hines, surprisingly was placed in the front passenger seat of the car he was driving. This is a civilian car that he was driving. And from the reports, I've gathered that one of the police ranks entered Mr. Headley's vehicle and entered the driver's seat of that civilian car. And the other rank entered the back passenger seat of the said vehicle. According to the reports, Dr. Hines, the rank then drove the vehicle off. And during the journey, the ranks claim, from what I've read, that Mr. Headley reached for what looked like a gun. It is further reported that Mr. Headley's action prompted the rank sitting in the back seat of the car to shoot Headley. He was then taken to the Diamond Diagnostic Center where he succumbed whilst receiving treatment. So, Dr. Hines, given what is in the public domain, given the information that has been published, and the statement issued by the Ghana Police Force in relation to this death, in my judicial opinion, and I've served on the bench for 10 years, 10 full years, I am of the view that the circumstances surrounding the death of Mr. Headley are indeed questionable. I've read, like you and the relatives and most of the citizenry, the statement released by the Ghana Police Force. And what I've deduced, like you may have, and what the citizenry may have deduced, that the statement, it raises more questions than answers. The police actions, and I think this is well known, the police actions and their conduct, it is guided by standard operating procedures. But were the standard operating procedures adhered to on that fateful day? That's the big question. And I think that is where our discussion is headed.
An attorney at law. She served as a magistrate. So she has tremendous experience, and she's one of the newer members of the National Assembly, that young team that is facing the onslaught of this regime in this particular time. Tonight, she is putting on our attorney's hat, our human rights hat, and helping us to make sense. Gita, what are some of the questions that are being raised from that report?
All right. Dr. Hines, before I get into the questions that have being raised, I just want your viewers and your listeners to be reminded that the standard operating procedures dictate that any arrest and the interviewing of suspects are essentially two separate processes that provide opportunities for investigators to acquire evidence. Further, the SOPs indicate that the initial and early stages of these processes are critical to the investigator and must be dealt with in the best possible manner to ensure that the evidence recovered is credible. The SOPs, Dr. Hines, indicate that the arrest itself allows the investigator to record what responses the suspect makes on arrest, as well as what evidence is secured on searching. The police, as we all know, they have extensive legal powers that can be used to arrest and detain persons suspected of being involved in the commission of crime. Ideally, this should only be used when circumstances justify, such as persons found committing a crime, about to committing a crime, or when a crime has been committed, or to bring suspects before the court of law. Before an arrest takes place, the investigator or the police officer who is in charge must consider or should consider the following: is there power to arrest? Are there grounds for arrest? Is the arrest necessary? The SOPs, Dr. Hines, state that in order for an arrest to be lawful, the police must inform the person who they are arresting that they are under arrest. They must tell the persons the reasons and the grounds for the arrest. And once again, according to the SOPs, the suspect must always be searched on arrest for reasons which include to look for items which may include weapons, which may cause danger or injury to the suspect or anybody else, or to locate anything or any equipment which have been concealed on the person that that may assist them in their escape from lawful custody. Um, so, Dr. Hines, what I'll say to you is that I've observed And when I interrogate this issue, it appears, and this is I'm telling you this from after having served 10 years on the bench. And this has been 10 long years. 10 long years. So, in my judicial opinion, I'll say to you that the SOPs which I have just articulated were not followed. And this is my opinion. And indeed, some of the questions which I have tabled in the National Assembly, and I'll tell you about some of those in a few, also indicate that there seem to be clear breaches of the standard operating procedures of the Guyana Police Force. And according to a statement issued from the Ghana Police Force, this matter was reported to the Office of Professional Responsibility and Dr. Hinds, and to the family of Mr. Peter Headley, and to all your listeners. And I say to you that I've written to the head of the professional responsibility, and this letter was sent off a few weeks ago. I've asked to be apprised of the outcome of this matter. Isn't this a reasonable request? And I'm sure you and every other right thinking person would agree with me. This is a reasonable request. The police statement states that this matter has been referred to the OPR. So I've written to them asking to be apprised of the outcome. And you know what? This office, or whoever is holding that office, does not have the decency nor the courtesy to acknowledge my letter. And I will say to you that this is a very sad state of affairs. And coming to your question now, I'm sorry that I took so long to answer your question, but you know that lawyers take forever to answer questions and they speak a lot. But some of the questions tabled in the National Assembly, Dr. Hines, are, and these questions were tabled on the basis of the reports that I've received and the questions that were being asked by the citizenry. I've also had a conversation with attorney at law, Mr. Mayor Robertson, who is representing the interests of Mr. Peter Headley. So some of the questions that I've tabled in the National Assembly are: what report led to the police in the direction of Peter Headley? Who were the ranks that reported to this report, and which unit do they belong to? Were these ranks wearing body cams or any recording equipment during this incident? And I must state here that I have tabled questions in relation to the usage of body cameras. And I intend to table some sort of legislation to govern the usage of body cameras on police officers. Additionally, I did ask that what are the protocols that govern the apprehensions of suspects who are in their vehicles? What are the protocols that govern the searching of vehicles of citizens? And Dr. Hines, you would know that from the police statement, they said they searched the vehicle and they found this television set. And then subsequently, they're telling us that Headley reached for something that what appeared to be a gun. Anyways, so another question that I've tabled is that in the event that searches are conducted, how thorough are those searches, and can the stashing of objects on the seat escape a thorough professional search? What are the protocols that govern the police taking command of the vehicles of suspects? This is private vehicles, Dr. Hines. In the event that a suspect is shot while in police custody, what are the standard operating procedures that govern that? The administering of medical attention, the taking of the suspect to the hospital. And also, I did ask that in the event of a suspect being shot and killed under questionable circumstances, what are the standard operating procedures that related that are related to the ranks involved in the incident, the general police apparatus, and the communication on this event. So, what I'll say to you is that based on what has been published, and based on the questions that I've received from the citizenry, I've tabled these questions to the National Assembly. I've also written to the OPR, and like I've said before, I've received no acknowledgement of my letter.
Ms. Edmonds, I'm so glad you came on tonight for a couple of reasons. One, the public needs to know that you have been on this case, that you've taken it to the level of the National Assembly, where you've
Oh,
laid.
Dr. Hinds, I must say to you that I've taken a lot of cases to the National Assembly. I've taken the case of the Henry and the Harish murder to the National Assembly. There was also the death of a prisoner at Lusignan under questionable circumstances. And I was of the firm view, Dr. Hinds, that the SOPs were breached because from what the family have said to me and what was shown to me by the postmortem report, this is a case where a prisoner was shot in the back, and I've tabled a motion on this. And because of the government's position, they have the motion was defeated because they enjoyed the majority in the House. But this motion was tabled on the basis from a humanitarian and from a perspective of justice, because the family reached out to me and they said to me, this is in relation to Earl Graham, who was shot and killed at Lusignan prison. I'm not sure if you're aware of a motion that I've tabled, and they've
Oh,
said
I was.
to me that, and I remember the sister words to me. They said, Miss Gita, my brother was due to be released within 2 weeks. Why would he be in a rabid, raucous, or agitated state? And he was shot in his back. And the postmortem report suggests something else. And they said, you need to provide us with answers. And I've tabled a motion in the assembly calling for an independent investigation into this matter. And Dr. Hinds, it pains me that this motion was defeated because it was brought on humanitarian grounds. This was a family that was asking for justice. Why was it that my brother was killed? Why was it that my brother was shot in his back? If my brother was shot in his back, clearly he was not posing a risk.
Yes, you're quite right. And these are the things that I think our audience, the general public, would like to know. And that's the reason for programs like these, so that members of parliament could come on and could tell us what you're doing. Lots of time, people in the audience get frustrated with parliamentarians because they think you guys just go there, you don't do any work. But this kind of work that we're doing is very important. I am very close, and I grew up with a political personality in Guyana called E.U.C. Kwayana. And the kind of painstaking work that you're doing, that's the kind of work that I grew up seeing him doing. Ordinary people being killed, and he would take his time and ask questions, so forth. And a lot of time it paid dividends. So Gita, you're waiting on them. But are you going to stop here if you don't get justice for?
Oh, certainly not, Dr. Hines. I certainly don't intend to stop here.
What do you
Um,
intend to do? Tell us.
Oh, I will definitely tell you, as the sitting member of parliament with the responsibility of home affairs, these matters fall within my remit. I monitor all things that fall within that portfolio. And as a consequence, this issue has engaged my attention and that of my colleagues and that of the leader of the parliamentary opposition. And as you know, Dr. Hines, there has been a public outcry over this incident. Social media has been what's the word? There's been a buzz over this matter, and it seems to be a matter of public interest. Hence, the desire for answers ought to be satisfied by the parliamentary representative. Taking into account, Dr. Hines, that good policing forms the basis for a just and democratic society, and cognizant of the fact that Guyana has had a history of extrajudicial killings, and being mindful that the citizenry is demanding answers, we have been engaged. And when I say we, this is not Geeta Chand and Edmund. This is we, the APNU AFC coalition. This has been a coalition effort. And when I speak here, I don't represent me as me, Geeta Chand and Edmund. I represent me as a representative of the coalition, a member who I am proud to represent. So this matter has engaged our attention, and this matter has engaged our attention from its inception. And I want to say to you, Dr. Hines, to your viewers and to the Headley family, I have spoken, I've had an initial conversation with attorney at law, Mr. Mayor Robertson, who is representing the interests of Mr. Peter Headley. And I want to say to all of you that all local avenues will be explored, all local avenues will be exhausted, and if the situation remains the same as it is, I intend to take this matter to the international level. And why? The question is why. I know you're going to ask me. So before you ask me, Dr. Hines, I'm going to tell you the family of the Headleys, the citizenry, are demanding answers. We simply cannot allow this to be another cold case. We simply cannot allow this to be another unsolved murder. In relation to taking this matter to the international level, I intend to exhaust all the local avenues. And I've been on the bench for in excess of 10 years. And I see myself as being a fair and an objective person. So I'll be fair and I'll be objective to the government. So I'll give them a fair and opportune time according to legal standards. And if this situation remains the same, Dr. Hines, I will be taking this matter with the blessings of the party that I represent, the APNU AFC coalition. I intend to refer this matter to the Commission on Human Rights. In its resolution of 1992 of 72, I think it is. I think they renewed their mandate on the special rapporteur, and they widened their title on the mandate to include extrajudicial as well as summary of arbitrary execution. So, from what I've gathered, the mandate of the special rapporteur covers all country, irrespective of whether a state has ratified relevant international conventions. And like we all know, the Human Rights Council, they have, I think it's in their latest resolution, it was sometime in 2015, on the mandate of the special rapporteur on extrajudicial summary or arbitrary execution. They've they've requested that special rapporteur in carrying out his mandate to continue to examine situations of extrajudicial or arbitrary executions that warrant, Dr. Hines, immediate attention or where early action might provide further deterioration. And I think the second paragraph says, from recollection, I'm speaking here, to continue to draw the attention of the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights to serious situations of extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary executions that warrant immediate action or where early action might prevent further deterioration. All these are forums, Dr. Hinds, that I intend. And when I say I represent a coalition, the APNU AFC. And when I say I, so it means that we plan to exhaust seeking all these remedies in relation to this case and in relation to other cases in relation to this sort of nature that has been brought to our attention. So if you'll permit me, I want to say to your listeners, to the Headley family, that the opposition, the APNU AFC, will explore. We will explore all possible avenues to ensure that justice is served. Justice must be served. We will ensure that there are answers to the questions that I've tabled to the National Assembly. And in addition, also to the questions that the citizenry have, and then in addition to the questions that are being posed by the family members, also to ensure that those who are responsible, Dr. Hines, are held accountable. And I want to say to you that this APNU AFC parliamentary opposition, we will continue to hold this government accountable. And if you'll permit me, before we proceed further, I just wish to state that we are really in a sad, and I think you'll agree with me. You're shaking your head, so that means you're agreeing with me. We are really in a sad and distressing state of affairs. Crime is on the rise, and that is worrying. And why it is worrying, it is that the government has no discernible strategy to deal with this escalation in crime. The minister who has responsibility for security has been silent. And in my estimation, using my judicial and analytical mind, Dr. Hines, I find that um, well, I say I find, I'm no longer on the bench, but I'm of the view that he is clueless and he is visionless. And there seems to be no government plan or strategy to de escalate crime. The opposition, we have called for a national conversation. We have called for a national dialogue so that we could be a part, in addition to the other stakeholders, to formulate some sort of strategy, some sort of plan to de-escalate the rising crime situation. And I must say to you that I've written to the Commissioner of Police, and this is out of a meeting that we have had, which was this meeting was led by the leader of the opposition, where the Commissioner of Police, I don't know whether he's acting, Mr. Hoppy, has promised to share with us the stats on crime. Those information hasn't been being forthcoming, Dr. Hines. And I've written to him and I've said, I've reminded him of the meeting. I've reminded him of his commitments, and I say, "Can you provide me with this?" And like the letter that I've sent to OPR, there has been no acknowledgement. And I need also to say to you that I receive daily complaints from citizens, the misuse and the abuse of government officers and possibly civilians in their use of these flashing lights and sirens. I've tabled that question. Minister Ben has provided a response. I've written to him recently. Also, there has been no response to that. And if in your answer to me in the National Assembly, you're saying to me, this is what you've inherited this since August 2nd. Why is it you cannot remove these sirens? And this is causing an unnecessary burden. I've personally experienced this on my way to work on Vlissingen Road. I'll say to you, Dr. Hinds, I'm in the middle lane. There are vehicles positioned on both sides, and there is this big fancy tinted vehicle. I don't know whoever is inside. I've looked at the number plate, and using my judicial mind, I know this is one of the vehicles not qualified under the Motor Vehicles and Regulations Act. And you're there with your sirens and you're flashing to me, and I'm in the middle. Where do you want me to go? You're basically trying to push me off the road. And this has happened to me many times on my way to Barbies, on my way to see my parents, Dr. Hines. This has happened to me numerous times, and I've written on this matter, and people have been calling me on this matter here. You're going to the market, you're going to the supermarket, you have these sirens and this flashing light. Isn't that an abuse of power? And I've written and I've asked, this has to stop. And before you go on to whatever else you have to ask me, I'm sorry, but lawyers do tend to speak a lot.
I
So
do have another lawyer
I am
waiting.
very guilty of that.
Yeah. Gita, I do have another lawyer waiting, and time is catching up on us. We will keep the line of communication open as far as progress is made or not made on the Peter Headley matter. But you've raised a whole lot of other matters that I would want to talk to you about in a fuller program where you'll have more time. Um, in the meantime, I want to say we're glad that you have come on, because this audience here needed to know that kind of information. They needed to know what MPs were doing. We often hear MPs are going into communities and so on, but we've never, certainly on this program, heard the kind of detailed work that you are doing on behalf of ordinary people. And we want to salute you for that. And certainly, like I said, I will have you back in a fuller program where we will talk about all issues that pertain to national security. Thank you again for.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much. But if you'll permit me, lawyers do, I think lawyers earn their living by speaking a lot. But
Yes.
I mean, in the best of my interest and in the best of the interest of the party that I represent, I just want to say that in before I leave, that in one of my budget speech to the National Assembly, I did say to the House and to the public that the doctrine of ministerial responsibility applies. And the Home Affairs Minister, Dr. Hines, must be held accountable. We see what is happening. They're hiding the statistics from us. I've written to the acting commissioner, Mr. Hoppy, and like the head of the OPR, he has refused to even acknowledge my letter. So I think what Mr. Ben should do is do the honorable thing and resign. He doesn't enjoy the confidence of the citizenry. I continue to repeat this call. And on your program tonight, I continue to repeat this call. The state owes its citizen a duty to protect all of us, to ensure that all of us are kept safe. So I'm sorry if I've exceeded my time,
No,
but
no,
it's
no.
probably the lawyer training in me that allows me to, or trains me to speak so much.
Yes, but no. You were quite persuasive in your arguments, and you've articulated the case around the Headley matter very much. And we shall ensure that we bring you on from time to time to give us an update on where things are. So again, thank you very much.
I'm sure you're not going to limit me only to the Headley matter because there's so many matters that are engaging my attention.
Okay,
There's
sure.
so many matters.
sure.
So I hope you'll not limit me only to the Headley matter.
I promise that I will not limit you because you've raised
Thank
a
you
number of
so
issues.
much. It has been my absolute pleasure to be on your program, and to your listeners and to your viewers. I bid you good night.
Thank you very much. And there we have it, a young advocate standing up in the big yard on the Politics 101 and giving a good account of herself and treating with the matter at hand. Selwyn Peters.
Yes, good evening, Dr.
My
Hinds.
brother, I apologize for keeping you waiting so long.
No, it was it's an interesting program, and so I got to hear a lot from Dr. Van West Charles, who, I knew since he was the Minister of Health,
Mhm.
and it was great to hear Geeta Chand and Edmund, and get caught up with what they're doing on the crime front, especially in her role.
Yeah, so when I got to know you during the Walter Rodney Commission hearings, 2014, I think it was.
Yes, 2014, 2015.
2015. You reside in Canada, but you like you're in Guyana. Why have you taken this conscious decision to keep an active interest in your own country? You're admitted to the bar in Guyana, right?
Yes, I am.
Yes. Why?
Well, I mean, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my father, who was Barton Abrams and who was a very good friend of UC Guyana and Dr. Walter Rodney, they're all buried in Guyana. So, my parents I wasn't born in Guyana, but my parents are Guyanese. My grandparents are Guyanese. My great-grandparents are Guyanese. And, I feel I have an obligation to contribute to Guyana. And I must tell you, Dr. Hinds, that 99% of my work in Guyana is pro bono. I don't charge a penny. So people don't go into their pockets to pay me. When I did the Walter Rodney case, I wasn't paid because I didn't demand payment. And some of the current work I'm doing is as well pro bono.
Very good to hear that. Let me let you get your teeth into this Peter Headley matter in particular and extrajudicial killings in Guyana in general. Is there a problem in that area?
Yes, there is a serious problem, Dr. Hinds. When I don't know if you know, at one point during the Granger administration, I was counsel for the Joint Services.
Yes, I remember.
So I represented all the forces, and so I got to sit in meetings. And there was one case, the Ledlow case, where 2 young men were shot and killed in a churchyard. And one shot was fired out of the firearm, which they found, and that shot was fired at the scene of the robbery. And the police reported that there was a gunfight in the churchyard, and these 2 men got killed as a result of this gunfight. When I sat in the meeting, all the police officers were speaking about, these are investigators from the Office of Professional Responsibilities, all above the rank of inspectors. All they were speaking about is that the police officers at the scene didn't fix the crime scene properly.
Oh.
Right? And I did a video, actually. I did a video on this on my YouTube page, flushing out my emotions and what I heard on the Ledlow case. And there was no traction on that. If it was over here, there would have been mass demonstrations with the police. extrajudicially killing two persons. No traction on it. There was one of the cases where five people were slaughtered on the seawalls, and a whistleblower went to Nigel Hughes and complained about what he saw. And there was no traction on it in Guyana. The Headley case. I listened to your program on Sunday. I heard the accounts of the man's son, his niece, his wife, and there was another Headley person there as well with you. I listened to the accounts, and obviously it's troubling. Obviously, it's troubling. The extrajudicial killing in the Guyana police force is not a PPP issue or an APNU issue. It's an administration of justice issue, and you have to really ask, how do we educate those who support extrajudicial killing, inclusive of law enforcement officers, on the proper role of the police, prosecution, the defense lawyer, and the judge and jury in a society based on the rule of law? We can't have a society based on the rule of law if the police are taking the law into their own hands on the street. We're going to get back to the stage where people also deal with the police in the same way the police are dealing with them. And you see that in the United States, where people certainly have lost complete confidence in the police, and they're asking to defund the police, disband the police, abolish the police. So we're going to reach at that stage in Guyana, because the problem in Guyana that is even more sad is black police officers killing their own people, black people. It's not the racialized violence that we have in North America that we have to confront. It's our own people
That
killing
makes it
our own
more
people.
complex.
Yes.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You mentioned that the cases you cited, there was no traction. Why do you think that Chinese are not up in arms on this issue of extrajudicial killing?
There seem to be a lack of confidence in our judicial system. The statistics show that people have very little confidence in the judges, and very little confidence that there can be justice where there's a case before the court. And that is more, not necessarily in the judiciary, but in the police, certainly not fulfilling their proper investigative role in collecting evidence, analyzing evidence, and properly presenting evidence to the court. So a lot of cases, a good defense lawyer can beat very easily, because the police rely on forced confessions. And so these cases are thrown out because the statements that are taken are not voluntary. They're not recorded, either video or audio. And so if the person says, well, oh, the police beat me up, the police smashed my head up against the wall, or they did something much more gruesome to get a statement, I mean, it's more likely that the weight goes towards the accused than the police. So people are fed up. People are fed up with the judicial system. And so a lot of people subscribe to the notion that they get what they deserve on the street.
Mhm, mhm. You work closely, as you said, as counselor for the police. Did you detect a will to change the culture in the police force?
No, there's a lack of will to change the culture in the police force. I mean, if you look at what's going on right now, where police officers are falsely making allegations against other officers, bringing specious charges against other officers simply for their own personal benefit, it tells you the sort of culture that exists in that organization. It's a culture that's rotten from the top down. And at the moment, this deputy commissioner, who is acting in the role of commissioner, Nigel Hoppy, seemed to have abdicated his role to a man named Calvin Brutus. And Calvin Brutus has been running the police service at the moment in a manner that is quite sad. For sad, it brings down the entire confidence, the public confidence in that organization, the way that organization is being managed currently. So um, there's if the culture is rotten even on the inside, how can the public expect any semblance of justice or decency or respect or respect for their constitutional and civil and other rights for members of the Guyana Police Force?
You're one of the attorneys for Mr. Paul Slow, who's embroiled in what has become certainly one of the defining moments of the tenure of this regime. Do you think that case is going to lead us to some place where we can force some kind of reform within the police force?
Yes, because the Poslo case has, interestingly enough, the government issued two different show cause notices to Poslo, and both show cause notices raised fundamental issues. The first show cause issue not only dealt with Karim Bash and the improper role that the president was playing in terms of trying to influence the Police Service Commission, but it also showed Calvin Brutus and the way he was manipulating the Guyana police force to serve his own means. This second case here also brought out some fundamental problems where, in order to get their way in the Karim Bash matter, the government decided to starve a police service commission of funds to hire its own legal counsel. So it first intervened and filed a defense on behalf of the Police Service Commission, and then it withdrew the defense, leaving simply Karim Bash's action in court undefended. So both cases raise fundamental issues and troubling issues. Um, in some way, we have to be happy that the government tipped their hands in the way they did very early so that we can address these issues very frontally and let them know that, look, we're not going to tolerate demagoguery. We're not going to tolerate you um, trying to improperly influence a service commission. We're not going to tolerate you being vindictive towards persons who are not going to toe your line and persons who are going to be independent. And I'm disappointed because of all the hoopla over the election and the talk about integrity and independence and impartiality and all these lofty notions, that this is what we're dealing with in the early days of Mohammed Orfanali's presidency. And I'm glad that I'm representing Poslo because I'm viewed as neutral. And so they can't really say, well, oh, it's an AP&U lawyer. But I tell them as it is, because the state of affairs right now is quite unacceptable.
Um, did you expect the level of political interference in institutions like the police force from this government? You've been observing our politics.
Well, the government has been very aggressive. It's trying to take command and control of all levels and instrument of state, including the police and the army. Because what it has done is, you've heard how they just had an election for the police association, which nominates the commissioners to serve on the police service commission. It has sent off a whole bunch of senior officers. So they have the deputy commissioner Paul Williams. They sent him to do COVID relief, and have a senior superintendent acting or performing the functions that Paul Williams rightfully should perform. It's unfortunate that Paul Williams didn't go to the courts like as Paul Slow did in 2003 and litigate that matter. So he is sitting at the COVID-19 place doing nothing, while you have a senior superintendent, Calvin Brutus, running roughshod over everyone. You have they put Karim Bash, who has serious sexual assault allegations from quite a number of female officers, and predominantly black. So that's racialized sexual violence, where you have somebody like Karim Bash being forceful and aggressive in his sexual advances towards black women and punishing them, as a matter of fact, when they don't give in to his advances. That is clear in the McBean report. And they put him in charge of the Soko.
So,
You know, he needs to be suspended actually while these allegations are cleared up. He's a danger to the public. I said so. He's a danger to the public if he's so rampant in his approach and his aggression towards black female officers. It's a human rights issue as well, not only criminal but human rights. Where I live, he would have never been able to. Where I live, he would have never get away with it, because all those officers would have come to my office, and he would have been tied up in any number of human rights issues. Maybe I need to move back to Guyana for a while and do some serious litigation, serious rights litigations with these
yes,
cases.
yes, and you're quite right. A number of people in public office who have done terrible things, and they get away because our society, especially when it comes to women, women are afraid to come forward. There is no kind of Me Too culture yet developing in Guyana, so women walk around with their suffering, and these men get away. They're there in office. Thank God for the McBean report that we see what Karim Bash has done. And I'm glad you raised the racial element to it, because there is a racial element. It is not simply a police element. And I'm glad you raised that and called it out. Selwyn, we have run out on time, but now that we've established this contact, I'm going to have you on quite regularly to update us on stuff and to comment on larger political issues, because I know that you have those issues at heart. Any closing statement for us?
Well, Dr. Hinds, thank you for inviting me on, and you know, we have to hold the Guyana Police Force accountable. The Guyana Police Force must realize that they're there to serve and protect us. And I say us because you and I have our family back in Guyana that we care about. Their role is to serve and protect us. We don't owe them anything. We're paying our taxes, and we grant them that additional powers as citizens to police us. And they have to conduct themselves in a way that fosters public confidence and enhance the administration of justice. And right now, that's not happening. And the Paul Slow case has really brought out a lot of things to the fore. And the government would be well advised to take heed and to work not to politicize the police force any more than it has done, to certainly steer the police force in a professional direction. We want professional police officers who are unbribable, who has integrity, and who can act without fear or favor, malice, or ill will.
Thank you very much, Selwyn Peters, attorney at law, based in Canada, but spends a lot of time in litigations in Guyana. When I first met Selwyn, he came to Buxton, one of our emancipation celebrations. And ever since then, he has been a supporter of the 1st of August movement, tangibly always making a donation for emancipation activities. You Buxtonians in the audience, Selwyn is an adopted Buxtonian who has kept our village close to him. And like I said, he contributes. Hopefully this year, we will be able to, last year we couldn't do anything because COVID-19. We don't know what will happen this year. Given what is happening in the country, emancipation this year cannot be a quiet emancipation. I'm just saying, and serving notice to the various communities. This emancipation is not just to dance and eat and drink, conky and swank and so on, but to make statement about blackness and emancipation in Guyana. We'll talk more about that. And Selwyn, I'll bring you on to talk, to link North America, Black Lives Matter, to Guyana. Because
Yes.
often there's a pushback that they're importing North American issues into Guyana. Someone who has your feet in both places, you'll be able to bring that perspective. Thank you again, my brother, and we'll keep in touch.
But Dr. Hinds, I just want to say one more thing quickly.
Yeah.
I am actually a Buxtonian. You know, my grandfather was a guy named Randolph Guttersmith Abrams, and he's from
What?
Buxton.
That's your grandfather?
Yes, that's my grandfather. So I do have roots in Buxton.
Randolph Guttersmith Abrams is your grandfather.
That's
So
right.
you
And
are.
my father was a guy named Bertrand Abrams.
Ah, ah, all right, all right. So you are a Buxtonian. Well, we've discovered tonight. Selwyn is a Buxtonian, the Abrams family, well known in Buxton. Thank you, Selwyn. Until the next time.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks to you, audience, for staying with us tonight. We went a little bit longer than we intend to, but you must agree that tonight's discussion was rich. It was necessary. We talked water, we talked sanitation, and we talked about extrajudicial killings and the state of the police force. And of course, we got an announcement tonight on this program that Richard Van Westcharles will run for the leadership of the PNC. So we have got a lot of news coming out tonight. So until the next time, this is David Hinds thanking you for tuning in to yet another edition of Politics 101, where we educate, agitate, and of course, we stay strong. Good night.